So I came in from Michigan this week and I'm missing my Thursday night pickleball league to be with you guys today. That's how much I love you.
Thank you, Anthony.
We'd like to thank Brand Innovators for hosting an incredible event today. It's a pleasure to be on stage with you, Nicole, and we're going to have a conversation about how brands can stay culturally relevant through social media.
That's right. And I wanted to echo that sentiment. Thank you so much to everybody at Brand Innovators for hosting a really wonderful event and dinner last night. After working remotely for almost 2 years now, it's really nice to be in an environment and make eye contact and get to see people one-on-one. So thank you so much. And thank you, Danone, for hosting this in your beautiful offices. It's a pleasure to drive up and come here. So really appreciate that. As Anthony mentioned, I'm Nicole Schmeedle. I have a background in marketing and also in art and design. So really, I have kind of that left-right brain that works really well with social and content strategy. As he mentioned, we will be, sharing some insights and some experiences and hopefully some entertaining stories along the way of how brands can stay culturally relevant, identify cultural, moments and reactive trends, activate on them in an authentic way, and really see what the impact is on their brand.
Yeah, that sounds great, Nicole. So first off, let's level set with the group here. There's a lot of conversation around how brands can stay culturally relevant, especially on social media. From your experience and perspective, like what does that mean? Can you just break that down for the group?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think cultural moments in reactive marketing trends can be very broad. It can have a really wide range of everything from, legislation to specific events in fashion to TikTok trends. So really how I like to break it out is in two different categories. Looking at it from kind of the historical contextual value in that we've seen a lot of brands that have really strong brand values activate and use their voice in their product and their business in accordance to that. I think Patagonia was mentioned earlier. They made a really big announcement earlier this week. Given that we're here in kind of a food and beverage industry, I'm going to do some examples within that as well. Ben and Jerry's is another one that we see focused on the climate and human rights, and they seek out those opportunities to partake in those conversations and really incorporate that into their content strategies. Another one that I think we've seen most recently is Newman's Own. They actually have 100% of their profits are donated to their mission as well. And they most recently took the opportunity to share that alongside Patagonia with their news. So we see some of these more brand values driven cultural moments. In addition to that, we see some of the more reactive marketing trends. I think Oreo is one to note, Dunk After Dark, where sometimes there are those unforeseen moments that really align with your product or service that you can use to connect with your consumers. In addition to that, we're also seeing music, sound trends, and things that give brands the opportunity to open up to that.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's corn.
Yeah.
Was that a good one? My favorite was it's bungee. It was like a bungee workout class. Did you see that?
I don't know if I saw that one.
Yeah, you're like harnessed up and you're like jumping and like doing these crazy workouts.
That
and they
is
put it to the
true.
It's Corn track.
Yeah, I have to say the It's Corn one, I've been loving. There was actually just a New York Times profile on the It's Corn boy. And we're actually seeing that sound have 1.5 million uses, and brands are starting to activate on it. With the red thread being, a love and excitement for something.
Yep, 100%. And that's a great segue into the next question here. So how do brands discover these cultural moments or trends to participate in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's going to be different for everyone. I am, part of quite a few different social media manager societies and forums, and everyone has their own kind of methods and ways that work. I really like to use a pretty broad few different tactics to gather, what's going on in today's day in life. The first one being online sites and newsletters. I subscribe to Social Media Today, Marketing Deep Dive, Adweek. And that's where I can just ensure that I'm getting a quick glance of what's going on. In addition to that, as mentioned, some social media forums. There are some great groups out there and some great emotional support groups alongside of that too. When working in social, it doesn't sleep. It's 24/7, that it's really nice to have a group of individuals that share the same passion and excitement for social. In addition to that, highly recommend subscribing and really befriending your reps. Our reps at Meta, at Pinterest, at TikTok, they're all really, really great resources alongside our social vendor reps too. In addition to that, I like to crowdsource. Pretty much every company has a few of those social media mavens that whether they work in product or in customer service, they can be a really great resource and a really great way to build community inside of your internal kind of like teams and workflow. That I like to start a Slack thread and then just make sure that there's an open dialogue and ensure that everyone's ideas are welcome and valued. I also like to do kind of the more old school, personal kind of scrolling myself, but also talking to friends and people. The grocery store lines can be a really great way to meet and get connected to what people are doing, how they're feeling, and what gets them excited.
So once you've discovered a cultural moment or a trend, how can you determine if it's a right fit for your brand?
Yeah, I think, this is, I would say, the topic that comes up the most. I think that when determining, what cultural moment or trend to activate on, it's really important to make sure it feels right, to make sure that it, is aligned to your brand values, to make sure that it's authentic. Why are you doing it? And what value does someone get with seeing it? Are all really good questions to ask yourself. I recently had been working with the agency Mechanism, and we'd come up with a really great way to structure how to identify different kind of cultural moments and reactive marketing ideas. And kind of our 4 buckets or pillars, we're really looking at consumer insights. So, who is your audience? What do they care about? What value can you add to them in your relationship that you have with them on social? The second being cultural insights. What's going on outside of your specific industry? Third, looking at, kind of what your brand truth is. What makes you specific? What is your, service or product value benefits adding to someone's life? And then fourth, I think this is one is always really important, especially when it comes to some of the more reactive trends, but really understanding the historical context and the why behind a trend. So for example, let's bring up It's Corn. Knowing, this was done at an interview at a fair with a young boy, really, the movie, or excuse me, the clip and video, it embodies love and joy and excitement. And that really is the red thread then for your brand to potentially activate on. From there, I like to kind of figure out your unique brand way in. And last but not least, I always do the gut check. You can always make data informed decisions, but if it's not sitting right here, I'd really encourage you to listen to that or explore it with other members of your team. And it means that something's probably not right, and that's okay.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. So do you mind like giving everybody here an example of a campaign you've activated within a cultural event or something that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, there's been quite a few. Um, I think one of the more challenging and fulfilling ones to activate on was when I had been working at the North Face. And how many of you all have seen Free Solo? Okay, great, wonderful, gripping, so gripping. So as you all know, Free Solo was nominated for an award at the Oscars, which is a really exciting moment for both the industry, having an outdoor film being nominated in that space, but also for the brand, because Alex and Jimmy were, brand athletes. So our VP at the time, who is amazing, really, really admire him, encouraged us to brainstorm of a creative way for us to participate and show our support. to the entire film, but largely the industry as well. So we at the time were working with the agency Sid Lee, and we really wanted to try to brainstorm what common thread does Free Solo and the Oscars have. It wasn't going to be through fashion apparel because the climbers were wearing climbing shoes and, kind of like cut up shorts and this and that. But we had to think of some sort of red thread to connect the events. And so we decided to land on time. The Oscars historically run over almost every year. And Free Solo really was done on time. Does anyone know how long it took Alex to get up? 3 hours and 56 minutes. So we decided to see who would end first. Would the Oscars end or would Alex reach the top of El Cap? And we met in a Twitter war room throughout the course of the Oscars. And we, actively engaged in the Oscars, but through the lens of time and providing updates at each mile marker of where Alex was on El Cap. For the record, the Oscars actually went longer than 3 hours and 56 minutes. And we had a lot of fun doing that. We engaged a new audience. And it was also a really fun way to participate in a moment that was a little bit outside of the outdoor traditional sphere.
So what's the impact of like participating in these cultural trends?
Yeah, so I think it can kind of be measured on twofold. One, looking at it from a campaign point of view. How does the campaign compare to your more traditional go-to-market benchmarks? I think in the long term, especially when it comes to reactive marketing trends, I had also recently done a fun TikTok while at Stitch Fix. Our goal and kind of our mission was really to make sure that people felt confident. And so we decided to activate on the trend, it's perfect. Is anyone familiar with that one? It's perfect, perfect, perfect. And in doing so, we actually garnered over 1.5 million views. And so, really, you can look at it on a post by post basis, but when you take a step back, it's a really great way to grow an engaged audience. So increase your followers, look at your engagement rates over time. But more importantly, too, I think it's a great way to build brand loyalty. I think, it's kind of a nice way to allow people to get, have some fun, connect with the brand and see a little bit more personal human side of them that you might not always see in other channels.
Yeah, I love that authenticity. So I guess another follow-up question is, like what are some aspirational brands to follow, or who's doing it right, or who should we kind of be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think that's another really great question. It definitely depends on the industry, what your brand values are, and what tone you feel comfortable with your brand. Depending on the product or service, there are going to be different tones and comfort levels around humor, around, what you do participate on in quick and reactive trends. Personally, though, I can say a few brands that I've been looking at and observing is, on TikTok particularly. I think Duolingo has done a really great job of building a great brand personality and staying really on top of the trends. I would say from a platform specific angle, I have been really personally interested in Seed. They've done a really great job of taking for what for me is a bit of a complex subject matter and breaking it into really digestible educational pieces of content. I also really respect brands that are really finding, the balance between feeding and playing into algorithm shifts, and then also staying true to their, content preferences and content mediums too.
Yeah, I guess another kind of good question I have for you, like where do you see content creators kind of fitting into the mix, or how do you go about leveraging them for some of the brands you've worked with and maybe your current role at DripDrop?
Yeah, that's something that I have been really, really enjoying working with. I think content creators are extremely valuable. I think oftentimes we attribute social platform shifts due to algorithm or platform features, but a lot of it's attributed to creators and how they're using the platforms and what type of content they're creating. Um, Personally, I've loved working with creators on kind of a more typical go to market cadence, but also really reserving a small kind of number of them to activate on for these reactive trends. I think when you are kind of deciding to build out and invest in a more reactive marketing strategy, one of the things that's really hard is making sure that you're not disrupting the creative workflow flow of your go-to-market process. So, you want to ensure that either you're carving out the time or you're actually adding in the resources that can be nimble, because as we know, a lot of these trends can pop up like that. One could be popping up right now. We just don't know. And so it's important to have that nimble flexibility without derailing, your other business priorities.
Yeah, I agree. How long has it taken you to activate on its corn?
That is one that we actually discussed in a meeting a few days ago.
Yeah, has anyone else here activated on that trend specifically? I'm just curious. I know we have a lot of CPG brands here. So where do you see new social trends and platforms emerging?
Yeah, I think the one that I'm really looking at right now is Be Real. I tend to really like to observe it from a more personal standpoint. And then when looking and evaluating new platforms, there's a few things I like to keep top of mind: who our target audience is, what types of content do they resonate with, and then looking at the platform, what's their growth rate, what types of content is being posted, and then what's the consumer behavior on those platforms. I would also kind of, urge you all to consider that there's also the option to join these platforms from a creator's point of view, not your
Mhm.
brands. If maybe your brand's not ready, a creator can be a really, I would say kind of um, nice way to test and learn and evaluate how people are responding to more branded content before making the full brand investment for joining a new platform.
With Be Real, I don't know if you've noticed this, but some like food brands I know are like offering very limited like coupons or discounts that you can only get um from those people.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with, this urge and this want to see a little bit more of an unfiltered, unplanned glance into people's lives. At the end of the day, I think, basic human needs. We want to feel valued and accepted and feel connected to others. And sometimes, unfortunately, some of these really filtered views can sometimes not be value adds, but value kind of detracts. So,
Yeah.
I think a lot of, interesting shifts are happening. I was actually talking last night at our dinner table. Social's always changing. And, I think it's kind of like the joy of it, but it can also be really uncomfortable too. And so I think kind of one of the keys to success is really um, leaning into being uncomfortable, trying new things, testing and learning at a relatively low risk, and really listening to your audience. There is so much to be learned from your audience through what they're saying, how they're tagging, what type of content they're creating. There's a lot of really great social listening resources there to listen and learn from your audience.
Yeah, it's kind of like earlier today they mentioned back in the day sitting in a call center and just listening, hearing what people are saying. This is like the new modern way to social listen through like Sprout Social or Hootsuite or you name it.
Totally. And I think like it's really interesting to see how like consumers and brands relationships with social have changed. For so long, we really had these expectations as brands that the consumers would do a lot of the work. They would follow us. They would comment on, content we were posting. And then we started to see the shift of UGC, where it gave brands the opportunity to comment back. Now, with a lot of the tools that we have, and something I'm really excited about is it gives us the opportunity to have more of a two-way relationship and actually us like reach consumers where they're at in a time of need where we can help them. Um, I love setting up social listening dashboards. One thing I'm really excited about at DripDrop is we offer an oral rehydration system that beats dehydration fast. So we're able to set up social listening dashboards around I'm thirsty, um, you know, common causes of dehydration, fatigue, headache. Whereas we can actually start reaching out and being able to be, a partner in them discovering us as well.
Yeah, that was great. I think we should just open it up for questions now. What do you think?
That sounds good.
Hi, I'm Nina from Danone. One question for you, or I guess maybe it's a two-parter. But really, how do you deal with brands who may be quick to pull the trigger of they want to jump on a trend, but it may not be right for the brand, or even vice versa? Your brand is too afraid to jump onto a trend. It's a little too scary to be able to create content really quickly that fits in with what's happening in an authentic way.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to answer the first part of your question, having a cultural and reactive marketing strategy is one pillar within your entire content strategy. So it's just adding, and it can be done in doses. So I would kind of urge you to look at, what am I hoping to accomplish with this? Looking at previous types of content pillars that perform well and saying, okay, educational content within style and fashion, or sorry, I should probably cater it to Danone, but I'm going to continue with the more apparel sphere given my background. That type of content works really well for us. Let's see if we can identify trends that are within, apparel and confidence, and trends that really ladder into that. And then we'll activate on one a month. And then set your benchmarks compared to your traditional content pillars and see how it performs. Over or under, look at the comments, and it'll take a while for your audience to adjust and adapt. It's a relationship. It would be like potentially completely changing, a certain aspect of you overnight. There's a bit of a shock factor. So I would encourage you to look at your existing content strategy, what themes are working well, and then start at a lower cadence that you feel comfortable with, and really use those evaluating factors of consumer insights, cultural insights. What is the historical context of this? And what's our unique way in that we can participate that's right for our brand, but also adds value and differentiates us? And then would you mind repeating the second part? Thank you.
The second part was really around brands who are timid or scared to jump on the trends because maybe we haven't done it before, or just, may not feel right.
Yeah, that's a hard one to comment on without having as much context of, kind of what your strategy is and things like that. I think I would encourage you to maybe start identifying trends that you could have participated in. So for example, whether it be a trending sound, a trending content type, and start a list of other brands that activated on it and how they performed. And then I would just start kind of building that historical context and start flexing the muscle of, okay, these are the trends that we're seeing. These are the different brands that participated. What would be our unique way in? It's like anything, it's new and uncomfortable. And so it's really like worming and flexing up that muscle, and getting used to, figuring out what your boundaries are with comfort levels. And as I mentioned too, listen to that gut feeling. It's there for a reason. Data informed decision making is really great. There's also, I think, when it comes to the cultural and reactive trends, a huge value in that gut factor. Yeah, and I can't wait to follow Danone's social media now, and stay tuned. We'll connect after.
All right.
Oh.
Hi again, I'm Monica from Cody. I'm just curious to get your perspective. If you think that, or just based on what you've seen, is there a tipping point when we know as a brand that, oh, we need to jump into this? Like, Be Real, for instance, like it's relatively newish, and TikTok at some point was also new. And I think somebody mentioned earlier that brands were kind of apprehensive about jumping in for a variety of reasons, right? Whether it was security or safety, etc. But as a brand marketer, I'm just like, these are all these things that are popping up, and when do I know that I need to be there? So I'm just curious to see, like, do you have anything that you look at, for instance, whether it's clear metrics or brands or just anything at all?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and one that's been kind of a consistent theme throughout my career, actually. Fun fact, one of my first titles was actually social coordinator, evaluating new and emerging social platforms. So I feel like I've, really contemplated this question quite a bit. And truthfully, there's not like a one size fits all answer. But there are a few things that I do consider when evaluating platforms. I think first and foremost, really being clear on who your audience is. So knowing, who they are, whether it be age, location, demographics, interests, consumption behavior. Any of that information will help you better understand if your audience is on that platform. Because at the end of the day, we're really trying to connect with our audiences and then also discover new audiences and prospective clients too. Secondly, when it comes to the platforms, the data component of it, I will admit, is typically done in conjunction with some sort of security team internally. However, kind of some of the metrics that I like to look at is the growth percentage rate, total followers. And then I also like to just keep a pulse on what other brands are doing and tapping into some of those social networks and forums. And if you can have a direct conversation of saying, hey, how was the adoption phase? How has it been working on this platform thus far? I think there's a lot of value in sharing experiences there that can help make your decision too. Yeah, it's something I think that a lot of us are wondering and still figuring out too, and probably will continue to do so.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Anthony.